For Sirius Radio, I'm Bill Bradley, and this is American Voices. For over 40 years, I've traveled around the country, listening to the stories Americans tell about their lives. And so I wanted to create a show where you can hear some of those stories too. In the next half an hour, you're going to hear stories that are funny, sad, informative, inspiring, and they come from all over the country. Today, a young comic befriends aging comedians.
You never know when they're going to go, so there's always that elephant in the room. And the life lessons I learned from him, and I just kept thanking him for being my friend.
Then we mash them, fry them, bake them, but there's more to the use and history of the American potato, that's for sure.
The gold that Cortez was looking for in South America, he found it in potatoes.
Plus, Americans love their baseball games, but sports writer Rob Nyer says that being at a game makes him feel like he has a connection with Americans who came before him.
I think of the old ballparks as sorts of time machines.
It's all coming up. I'm Bill Bradley, and this is American Voices on Sirius Radio.
American Voices with Senator Bill Bradley is made possible by Barrick Gold, America's largest gold producer and a force for good in the communities where we live and work.
Mike Fine is a stand-up comic. He performs all around the country in comedy clubs.
My best friend now, him and his wife are having a kid, and I asked them, do you guys know what you're having, a boy or a girl? And he said, they don't know and they don't care, just as long as it is healthy. And I found that to be kind of a concerning answer, because these are the same people that constantly try and set me up, and they ask me, what am I looking for? And I'm like, you know what, I don't care, just as long as they're healthy. Boy, girl, it's, This is great. I needed this. I enjoy being here tonight. I've been very depressed recently because I'm getting audited now. I'm getting audited by the IRS because they did not believe that last year I made $12,000. So I sent them a clip of my material and got them off my back on that one. You know, it's even look forward to a little refund this year. This is. I was recently performing at Kutcher's. You guys remember Kutcher's? Yeah. They underwent a massive $250 renovation. It really showed. I remember I went up to the room to shower before the show, and it turns out there were no towels in the room. You know, so I called down to the front desk and I asked, how about some towels? And they told me they were being used. They said they'd bring them up afterwards, but I'm not going to put dirty towels in my suitcase.
Mike Fine is also a comedy writer, coach, and producer. Mike, that was great.
Wow, thank you. That guy's really, really funny. I enjoyed listening.
Well, good. You were a staff writer for the Friars Club roasts of Quentin Tarantino, Dennis Rodman, and Jack Black. But Mike always felt a kinship with older people, in addition to being a very funny man. And so when he started befriending older comics, he realized that many of them were alone. They had no family, nobody to look after them. So he kind of became a chaplain so he could visit aging comics and help take care of them. And many of them didn't want to be buried alone next to strangers. So Mike started an organization to help organize and pay for their burials. Mike Fine joins me now in the Sirius studios. Mike, welcome to American Voices.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a real honor and a treat, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
So when you prepared, you do your whole shtick, or how much is spontaneous and how much is actually planned out in great detail?
So I actually spend a lot of time preparing for a performance. I basically tailor my act for every single audience.
Really?
Yeah, like if I'll be doing 3 shows a night in one club, I sit in the room while the people are coming in. You overhear if there's birthday parties or this or that. And, I'll constantly be riding up until the second I get up on stage,
So when did you start realizing that there were these aging comics who were alone?
In about April of 2009, I joined the Friars Club, a club for showbiz professionals in New York City. And it turns out that right when I got in there, all of a sudden I bumped into a guy by the name of Mickey Freeman, who was on the Sergeant Bilko show, Phil Silvers. And he was a huge star. And he was just walking around. And I was like starstruck. And I went over to him and he's like, yeah, let's, have lunch. And it's like, oh my gosh. So he basically took me under his wing. I was still pretty green, starting out in comedy, and whatever I need. I remember I told him I'm going up to Kutcher's to perform, like the joke.
But the $250 renovation.
Yeah, 100%. So it turns out he actually called me to tell me we need to go to lunch. So we go out to lunch, and I thought it was something important. He said, I want to give you some jokes so you'll be prepared when you get up there. He's 91 years old. He took a cab over there, probably took him God knows how long, but it was so important for him to see me succeed because he knows how challenging it could be performing up in the Catskills, that he wanted to make sure I was prepared and confident. And I remember after getting off stage, the following morning, I wake up 9 a.m. I have a phone call from Mickey Freeman wanting to know how I did.
That's a great act of friendship.
Yes, so I was drawn into him, and through him, he introduced me to everyone else.
And you found a lot of them were lonely.
Yeah. I don't think people realize the sacrifice a lot of people make. Unfortunately, a lot of performers, and this goes for all the performing arts, the demand of constantly being on the road, working late at night. A lot of performers don't get married, they don't have children. And also there's no job security in the sense where you have a 401k, you could go 6 months, solid work, and then 6 months, nothing. Also in show business, once you hit a certain age, you basically peaked. And now you have to live the rest of your life essentially on those savings. So when I met Mickey and he introduced me to, all his other friends, Joe Franklin and Professor Erwin Corey and Larry Storch and all these people, they had time on their hands to talk, to schmooze, to educate and to teach.
So what kind of things do you do to help aging comics?
So a lot of times it's just being someone to talk to. Some of these performers, they were tremendous stars on radio, television, going back to the 40s, 50s, 60s. They couldn't walk down the street without someone stopping them. So it turns out that when I see them now, it's even just acknowledging them, talking to them, I'm fascinated. I love these people.
Right.
These are, these are gems. These are links. There's a whole lineage of showbiz history and lore, and there are links in that chain, and they're only here for a certain amount of time, so you have to absorb as much of their knowledge as possible so you could pay it forward.
Did they ever tell you about what it was like when they were getting bookings and they were on the Johnny Carson show and people really were carrying them around on their shoulders, and then suddenly it just stopped?
Yeah.
How did they cope with that?
That's a great question. A lot of them had tremendous difficulty. And, when the whole world is basically calling you, and it was just like a flick of a switch.
Yeah, well, how did they deal with that? That's a very difficult thing.
So some, unfortunately, they go into depression. Some resorted to alcohol. Some drugs. Some of them just, they did work that was beneath them. I have a dear friend. His name is Max Alexander, one of the most talented performers, a dear friend, and who actually inspired me to start this organization. Also didn't have any children, was never married. And he went from performing in the clubs, Catch a Rising Star, all this stuff. And then one day he got booked to do the Johnny Carson show. Overnight, he went from making $500 to $10,000 a week. He worked basically Vegas for 30 years doing, about 40 weeks, I want to say, a year. And then, you get sick And, they stopped calling the movies, the agents. And thankfully, a lot of them stayed grounded and, they do the best they could.
A lot of them, you say, don't have any children and they didn't even get married. And so you're kind of like one of their children.
Yeah, in a sense.
I mean, why didn't they ever talk about why they didn't have a child or get married?
So I'm no relationship expert by any means. Listen, I'm single myself now. If you know anyone, I'm quite available. We could put that
boy, girl, like in your shtick.
Yeah. Well, it turns out though that unfortunately the demands of being on the road, and one thing I noticed was about performers. My dear friend Will Jordan, who passed away recently, and I officiated the funeral. One of our mutual friends got up and made a fascinating point. They said that Will only felt comfortable being around other performers. And a lot of performers feel that way. So when it comes to dating, it's hard to find someone that gets you, that you're driven by, your passion and, to perform, to entertain. And it's not something that you could just turn on and off like a light switch.
Right.
So a lot of times when you go out, women could be fascinated by you and, they always love a guy that can make them laugh. But when you actually get into that dynamic of a relationship where it's like, okay, this is just, okay. It is not
they only want me to make them laugh.
Yes.
They don't want to love me.
Yes. So there's that. And, it's also about, well, they probably just like me because I'm an artist, I'm popular, I'm TV, but do they really like me as a person? And
yeah, well, that's your issue.
Well, you really hit the nail on the head. Have you been talking to my mom? That's. But it turns out, though, that one of the wonderful things about when I started doing this chaplaincy work, and because I also have the foot in the entertainment industry as well, and I was able to relate and communicate with these people and talk the same language because I've walked the same footsteps.
Sure. So tell us about the chaplaincy idea. What gave you the idea of an organization to pay for burials of older comedians?
So when my friend Mickey Freeman passed away, Mickey didn't have any children with his wife Annie. I was very close with the two of them. And when they passed, the niece and nephew, thankfully, whatever money was left, they provided them with a burial. And same thing with my friend Max Alexander. So it got me thinking after my friend Max passed away, his brother took care of the service, but all these other people that aren't fortunate enough to have a support system. I constantly would go on Facebook and you would see GoFundMe for people to raise money for treatments, for this, for that. So basically, with all my connections and resources, I decided I'm going to go full force and raise money to provide the burial for the people, because I remember after one performer passed away, I'm not going to mention his name because it could embarrass the family, but it turns out he didn't have any kids, and the niece and nephew were very distant, and they didn't want to be bothered, and it's, let's just cremate him. And I'm like, you haven't seen him in 15, 20 years. So basically, they needed someone to step up and advocate for these people. And unfortunately, there was no one doing that. And I just stepped up to the plate.
And when you're relating to them, even in the latter stages of their life, you laughing about stuff? I
was in the hospital visiting my friend Mickey Freeman. He was they put on boxing gloves if you start grabbing at the tubes of oxygen. And I walked over there from the Friars Club. They wrote a big get well card for him where everyone signed. And right when I walk in, I'm so excited. I'm, Mickey, here's the card. And I'm trying to hand him the card. And, he keeps on trying to grab with his little boxing gloves. He just wants the envelope. I'm like, what's going on? I'm like, the card's here. And he just, envelope. And I finally give him the envelope and he just starts shaking it. He is short, little, he was 4'10", and he's just shaking it. And it turns out that I'm like, Mickey, what's going on? He's like, where's the check? And it's so even in his, he passed away, unfortunately, the a day or two later, and no energy, nothing, but he just wanted to entertain up until the very end.
But how does it make you feel to be around, someone who's much older and also around death?
So recently, my friend Will Jordan, the greatest impressionist of all time, hands down. I was with him when he passed away. I was holding his hand till the very end. I was in the room with him, and you never know when they're going to go. So there's always that elephant in the room, and it's scary. But to sit there with someone who you love and the life lessons I learned from him, and I just kept thanking him for being my friend. It's interesting. I've been in show business for 20 years. I've written for probably close to every big name that's out there. I've been offered so many big breaks. And then at like the last minute when, something falls through, I shot TV pilots and everyone loves it, but then it doesn't get picked up. And then you get frustrated. You want to give up. And then when I started this organization, I saw the arc of the whole timeline, the whole story. Had the shows picked up, had I, become a big star, who would have been here for these people? And after 120 years, they're not going to ask, did you write for De Niro? Did you write for this one? In the moment of need, I was there for my friends.
Listen, Mike, your humanity and generosity is what we try to highlight on American Voices. And so I'm really pleased and honored that you could come on and talk about this great organization and about your own spirit and about your sense of life.
My pleasure.
His organization is called Jewish Burial Fund for the Arts. To find out more, visit us on Facebook. It's facebook.com/American Voices with Senator Bill Bradley.
And if I had a camera showing all the light we give and showing where the light is.